Barcelona, with its rich history and vibrant culture, is facing a severe crisis. Unbridled tourism has turned paradise into a nightmare for residents, with overcrowding, exorbitant prices, and resource shortages devastating local life. Watch until the end to understand the extent of this crisis and its impact on the city's future. Barcelona, one of Spain's largest cities, has always attracted tourists with its historical beauty and vibrant culture. However, tourism, once hailed as an economic pillar, is now pushing the city to its limits. Streets that once hosted local celebrations are now choked with crowds of visitors, destabilizing urban infrastructure and forcing residents to deal with uncontrollable rent hikes and increased demand for basic services. The pressure on the housing market is palpable. With the growing popularity of short-term rentals, many apartments have been converted to accommodate tourists, resulting in a surge in housing prices. Families that have lived for generations in historic neighborhoods are now forced to seek new residences due to the financial impossibility of staying in their homes. This phenomenon not only alters the demographics of the neighborhoods, but also erodes the social fabric that has defined the essence of Barcelona for centuries. According to reports, housing prices have risen drastically, making life even harder for local residents. Additionally, the recent water crisis has exacerbated the challenges faced by Barcelona. Catalonia, the region where Barcelona is located, experienced the worst drought in its history, lasting almost 4 years. During this period, water restrictions were rigorously enforced, including severe fines for non-essential uses of water, such as washing cars and watering gardens. The strain on water resources due to the massive number of tourists is a critical issue, raising doubts about the sustainability of the city's current tourism model. Despite the difficulties, some solutions are being implemented by local authorities to mitigate the negative impacts of tourism. These measures include limiting new tourist apartments and regulating guided tours. However, the effectiveness of these actions is still under debate, and many question whether they will be sufficient to solve the problems in the long term. But how are the residents of Barcelona reacting to this constant invasion? In Barcelona, the increasing number of tourists has turned daily life for residents into a real challenge. The city faces the phenomenon of over-tourism, where the number of visitors exceeds the capacity of the urban infrastructure. Tranquil neighborhoods are overcrowded, and the narrow streets can barely accommodate the incessant flow of tourists. This chaotic scenario has pushed residents to their limits, provoking a wave of discontent and revolt. The protests by residents reflect the deep frustration with the current situation. Recently, thousands of Barcelona's citizens took to the streets to express their indignation against over-tourism. The demonstrations, which gained international attention, are a desperate attempt to reclaim the city from uncontrolled tourism. During these protests, dramatic scenes of confrontations with tourists and local authorities were recorded, highlighting the severity of the crisis. Residents feel that their quality of life is being sacrificed for the profits of the tourism sector, and the reaction has been strong and vehement. In one of the most symbolic and dramatic actions, enraged residents used water pistols to attack tourists on the streets of Barcelona. This act of civil disobedience, although non-violent, was a powerful way to demonstrate the frustration and exasperation of local residents. The scenes of tourists being surprised by jets of water went viral, drawing even more attention to the crisis the city is facing. This type of unusual protest underscores the residents' dissatisfaction and their search for ways to resist the tourist invasion. The central criticism from residents is that local authorities have prioritized the economic interests of tourism over the well-being of the population. The unchecked expansion of tourist accommodations and the lack of effective regulation are cited as the main culprits. Residents accuse the government of neglecting their basic needs and allowing uncontrolled tourism to destroy the unique character of Barcelona. This sense of abandonment by the authorities has fueled a growing resistance movement, with actions ranging from peaceful protests to more radical interventions. Tourists, often unaware of the situation, become an involuntary part of the problem. The massive presence of visitors not only overloads the urban infrastructure, but also alters the social dynamics of the neighborhoods. The local culture is diluted, and the cost of living soars, making the city increasingly inaccessible to its own citizens. The tension between visitors and residents is palpable, and the atmosphere of dissatisfaction intensifies with each tourist season. It is a vicious cycle where tourism, which should be an economic blessing, turns into a curse for the local inhabitants. But specifically regarding prices, how much more expensive has life become for the residents of Barcelona due to tourism in the city? In recent years, Barcelona has faced a significant increase in housing prices, driven by both tourism and demand from foreign investors. Recent data shows that the average price of property in the city rose to €4,167 per square metre by the end of 2023, representing a 2.6% increase compared to the previous year. Some areas, such as Gratia, saw even more dramatic increases, with prices rising by up to 33.27%. The rental market has also experienced substantial hikes. In July 2024, the monthly rent for a furnished 85 square metres apartment in an expensive area of Barcelona reached €1,705, while in more ordinary areas, rent was around €1,315. These values reflect a continuous rise, exacerbated by tourist demand and the lack of new residential constructions. Additionally, a new rental index set to be implemented in 2025 is expected to cap annual rent increases at a maximum of 3%, but many question the effectiveness of this measure given the rampant price increases. The surge in prices is not limited to the real estate sector. The overall cost of living in Barcelona has also risen significantly, impacting residents in various aspects of their daily lives. For instance, the price of a lunch menu in the commercial area can reach €19, while a litre of milk costs €1.06, and a dozen large eggs can cost up to €3.17. These increases mainly affect low-income families, who struggle to maintain their standard of living in an economy increasingly geared towards tourism. The economic and social pressure resulting from these increases has led many residents to leave the city or move to peripheral areas. Gentrification, fueled by real estate speculation and the influx of tourists, is transforming the social dynamics of entire neighbourhoods. Traditional shops and businesses are being replaced by establishments catering exclusively to tourists, eroding the cultural fabric that defines Barcelona. The authorities' response, although it has included some control measures, is still seen as insufficient to curb the housing crisis and the rising cost of living. If you're watching this far, subscribe to the channel, because videos like this take a lot of time and dedication to make, and your subscription is the best way to repay all the work spent delivering this kind of content on YouTube. It takes less than a second for you, but it means a lot to me. But back to the video. What are the strategies implemented to solve the problem of over-tourism in Barcelona? To tackle the over-tourism crisis, Barcelona's authorities have implemented a series of strategies and regulations aimed at mitigating the negative impacts of uncontrolled tourism. One of the most significant measures is the restriction of new licenses for tourist apartments. In November 2023, the city announced that it would not renew the licenses of 10,000 tourist apartments, with the aim of converting them into permanent residences by 2028. This measure means that instead of allowing these apartments to continue being rented short-term to tourists, they will be converted into housing available to local residents. This is intended to increase the housing supply and combat the escalating rental prices, making city life more affordable for residents. Furthermore, the city has implemented rules to limit the number of tourists in historically overloaded areas. Guided tours in the historic centre, for instance, now have a maximum limit of 15 people per group to reduce congestion in the narrow streets of neighbourhoods such as Ciutat Vella. These measures aim to preserve the character of historic neighbourhoods and improve the experience for both residents and visitors. However, critics argue that such restrictions are merely palliative and do not address the root of the problem, the excessive economic dependence on tourism. Another strategy adopted is the promotion of lesser-known areas of the city as alternative tourist destinations. By redirecting the flow of visitors to less touristy neighbourhoods, the authorities hope to distribute the benefits and impacts of tourism more evenly. This approach, although innovative, faces significant challenges, such as the resistance of tourists to deviate from traditional tourist spots and the inadequate infrastructure in these alternative areas. The effectiveness of this strategy depends on careful implementation and investments in infrastructure to ensure these neighbourhoods can accommodate tourists without compromising the quality of life for residents. However, the implementation of these strategies often encounters a lack of political will and pressure from powerful economic interests. Many residents and activists argue that the measures adopted so far are insufficient and overdue. The central criticism is that local authorities have been complacent with the tourism industry, prioritising profits over the well-being of citizens. This perception of neglect has fueled a sense of distrust and frustration among residents, who feel their voices are frequently ignored in decisions that directly affect their lives. Barcelona, with all its beauty and cultural wealth, stands on the brink of a precipice. The over-tourism crisis is not just a matter of numbers, but a deep problem that threatens the soul of the city. The lives of residents have been devastated by an uncontrollable influx of tourists, transforming historic neighborhoods into overcrowded and unsustainable areas. Streets that once hosted local celebrations are now packed with visitors, making daily life a constant challenge. The essence of Barcelona is being lost, and this calls for urgent and profound reflection on the city's future. The measures implemented by the authorities, although well-intentioned, have been insufficient to contain the impact of uncontrolled tourism. The restriction of licenses for tourist apartments and the limitation of guided tours are steps in the right direction, but much more needs to be done. The promotion of alternative areas as tourist destinations can help distribute the flow of visitors, but this strategy requires robust planning and investment to be effective. The central criticism is that the proposed solutions are often palliative, failing to address the underlying causes of the crisis. The residents of Barcelona have shown remarkable resilience in the face of this crisis. From street protests to symbolic actions like using water pistols against tourists, the local population is fighting to reclaim their city. These acts reflect a deep sense of frustration and despair, a reaction to the perception that their voices are not being heard. The message is clear. Something needs to change for Barcelona to find a sustainable balance between being a world-famous tourist destination and a livable place for its citizens. The economic impact of over-tourism cannot be ignored either. While tourism brings significant revenue, it also inflates housing and living costs, making life increasingly expensive for residents. Gentrification is driving long-standing families out of their neighborhoods, replacing local culture with a commercialized and diluted version. The city's economy is becoming increasingly dependent on tourism, a dependence that can be dangerous in the long term, especially given the history of global crises like the recent COVID-19 pandemic. At this critical moment, it is imperative that all stakeholders, residents, tourists, authorities, and investors come together to find solutions that ensure Barcelona's sustainability. The city must be more than a playground for tourists. It must be a place where residents can live, work, and thrive. The future of Barcelona is at stake, and the actions taken today will determine whether the city can regain its soul and identity or continue to be consumed by uncontrolled tourism. In your opinion, should Barcelona focus more on its residents and limit tourism, or should it not prevent people from other places from visiting the city? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this video has provided you with valuable insights, don't forget to like and subscribe to the What is Happening channel. Also, take a moment to watch these 2 other videos appearing on the screen right now. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time.